ABC General Hospital Spoilers reveal that, at the Quartermain mansion, what begins as a measured conversation quickly transforms into something far more unsettling. Ned has never been a man who confronts lightly, especially when family is involved. His instincts are sharpened by years of watching alliances crumble and reputations burn. So when he chooses to question Chase's recent behavior, it is not out of petty suspicion, but out of a deep, protective urgency. He has been observing patterns, subtle shifts in attention, questionable priorities, moments when Chase's focus drifts somewhere it should not. To an outsider, those might look harmless. To a father, they look like warning signs. Ned's confrontation is not theatrical, it is deliberate. He frames his concern around priorities around responsibility. Yet beneath that careful wording lies a darker implication, that Chase's recent adjustments in behavior may not be as innocent as they appear. Chase has claimed he is recalibrating, that he is simply navigating complicated emotional territory involving Willow and Michael, but Ned senses something more complicated, something evasive. Adjustments, after all, can conceal as much as they reveal. When someone begins correcting their actions too quickly, too deliberately, it often means they are attempting to get ahead of exposure. The truth Ned fears is not merely about divided loyalty, it is about consequence. If Chase's actions, whether driven by guilt, unresolved attachment, or misplaced obligation, have crossed into ethically dangerous territory, then Brooklyn stands directly in the line of fire. Emotional negligence is damaging enough. But if Chase has been involved in decisions or interventions that ripple outward, influencing legal matters, manipulating situations to protect someone else, interfering in affairs that carry legal or reputational risk, then the stakes escalate dramatically. Brooklyn's name, her stability, even her future as a mother could be jeopardized by secrets she does not yet know exist. Chase insists that his recent behavior represents growth. He claims he is trying to adjust to correct missteps. Yet, Ned presses harder, questioning what exactly is being adjusted. Is Chase refining his priorities or concealing past errors? Is he distancing himself from Willow for Brooklyn's sake, or because circumstances forced his hand? These distinctions matter. In families like the Quartermains, perception can be weaponized. A single scandal, a single exposure of wrongdoing can stain generations. What makes the situation more volatile is the implication that Chase's actions may not simply be emotional misjudgments, but strategic ones. If he has intervened in matters involving Willow and Michael, in ways that stretch the boundaries of law enforcement ethics, bending protocol, withholding information, or quietly shielding someone from accountability, then those choices carry weight. Even if made with good intentions, such acts can be construed as misconduct. And if uncovered, they would not just damage Chase's career, they would explode into Brooklyn's life with devastating force. Ned senses the fragility of the moment. Brooklyn has fought hard for stability, for happiness that does not collapse under the weight of Quartermain drama. The idea that Chase's hidden decisions could undo that foundation terrifies him. His questioning, therefore, is not accusatory for sport, it is protective in essence. He wants clarity before damage becomes irreversible, yet Chase's defensiveness only fuels suspicion. The more he frames his actions as harmless adjustments, the more Ned wonders whether something far more serious is being obscured. There is also the emotional dimension, the possibility that Chase's unresolved connection to Willow has influenced choices that compromise his marriage. Even if no crime has been committed, emotional betrayal can feel equally catastrophic. Brooklyn's trust is not infinite. If she discovers that her husband has been entangled in decisions meant to protect another woman, even under the guise of professional duty, the fallout could be seismic. The looming shock lies in the uncertainty. Ned may not yet possess proof of wrongdoing, but he senses a fracture forming, and fractures, left unattended, widen. If Chase truly has crossed a line ethically, legally, or emotionally, the revelation would not merely strain his marriage. It could alter alliances within the Quartermain household and ignite a chain reaction of mistrust. In that tense space between suspicion and confirmation, everything feels precarious. Chase stands at a crossroads, claiming reform, while shadowed by doubt. Ned stands as both interrogator and guardian, unwilling to let blind faith endanger his daughter. And Brooklyn, unaware of the full scope of this confrontation, remains the potential casualty of truths that are still unfolding. Should those truths surface, the shock will not come from accusation alone. It will come from the realization that the danger was always closer than anyone wanted to admit. Ned's anxiety would not be rooted in jealousy or control, but in instinct. He has lived long enough inside the Quartermaine legacy to understand how unresolved emotions can metastasize into something far more destructive. The possibility that Chase still carries even a fragment of attachment to his former love unsettles him deeply. In Ned's view, emotional ambiguity is not harmless nostalgia, it is instability, and instability has no place in a marriage that is preparing to welcome a child into the world. When Ned presses the issue, he does so not as an adversary, but as a father determined to protect his daughter from slow burn devastation. He questions whether Chase has truly severed the emotional ties that once bound him elsewhere. He wonders whether Chase's recent attempts to adjust his priorities are genuine transformations or simply reactions to mounting pressure. The distinction matters. Anyone can promise change when confronted. True change reveals itself in patterns, in consistency, in sacrifice, in clarity. Chase responds with conviction, perhaps even desperation. He insists that Brook is his future, that whatever emotional history lingers no longer dictates his actions. He emphasizes that his heart belongs with his wife, and with the child they intend to raise together. He may even explain that he and Brook have already sought legal guidance from Alexis, taking concrete steps toward adoption. That decision, he argues, proves commitment. It is not just a romantic declaration. It is a legal, binding intention to build a family. Yet Ned remains unsatisfied. Adoption plans are noble, but fatherhood is not theoretical. It is relentless. It magnifies flaws. It tests patience, loyalty, and resilience. Ned reminds Chase that once a child enters the picture, there is no room for emotional confusion. A father cannot divide his focus between the present and unresolved ghosts from the past. Every hesitation becomes magnified. Every inconsistency becomes a crack in the foundation. And then the ground shifts. The possibility that Brook is already pregnant reframes everything. The news lands not as gentle joy, but as a seismic revelation. What was once a conversation about preparation becomes a reckoning about urgency. There is no more gradual transition into parenthood. It is happening now. The stakes no longer revolve around hypothetical adoption timelines. They revolve around a heartbeat already forming, a life already depending on stability. For Ned, this revelation intensifies his fear. If Chase's priorities have been wavering up until this point, the margin for error has vanished. A pregnant Brook cannot endure emotional betrayal, public scandal, or legal complications stemming from Chase's past entanglements. Her health, both emotional and physical, now depends on calm and certainty. And if Chase has allowed even the perception of divided loyalty to linger, that perception becomes dangerous. Chase feels the weight of it instantly. Regret, once manageable, becomes suffocating. He recognizes that his recent distractions, whether emotional concern for Willow, professional entanglements, or misplaced attempts at heroism, have created unnecessary strain. Even if his intentions were honorable, perception is reality, and reality can wound. He vows to repair the damage, not with promises alone, but with action. He acknowledges that he disappointed Brook, that his divided attention left her questioning her place in his life. He accepts that love is not proven through grand gestures, but through unwavering presence. And now, with the knowledge of impending fatherhood, that presence must be absolute. Yet beneath his determination lies a fragile truth. Transformation is difficult under pressure. Becoming the man Ned demands, the man Brook deserves, requires more than apology. It requires severing emotional ties that once felt essential. It requires drawing boundaries with former loves, with complicated alliances, with any narrative that does not serve his marriage. Brook pregnancy becomes more than a joyful twist. It becomes a catalyst for structural change in the story. It forces every character to adjust. Ned must recalibrate from skeptic to cautious supporter. Chase must evolve from conflicted husband to decisive father. Brook, though perhaps unaware of the full extent of this confrontation, becomes the emotional center around which everything rotates. The shock lies not only in the pregnancy itself, but in the timing. It arrives precisely when trust is under scrutiny. It exposes vulnerabilities. It accelerates decisions. It demands clarity. If Chase rises to meet this moment, the pregnancy could solidify his redemption. If he falters, the fallout will be catastrophic, not just for his marriage, but for the fragile unity of the Quartermaine family. And so, the tension lingers in that uncertain space between regret and resolve. Ned watches carefully. Chase stands determined yet tested. Brook carries the future, unaware that her pregnancy has transformed a quiet confrontation into a defining crossroads. In this unfolding chapter, fatherhood is not simply a blessing. It is a proving ground. And whether Chase emerges stronger or fractured will determine whether this shocking revelation becomes the foundation of a stronger family or the spark that ignites its unraveling. At the Quartermaine mansion, the tension would no longer be subtle. Ned would move past quiet concern and into decisive action. In his mind, enough damage had already been done. Chase's relentless pursuit of Michael, whether framed as justice, suspicion, or personal frustration, had crossed a line. What may have begun as professional duty had begun to feel personal, obsessive, and Ned, protective not only of his daughter but of the fragile stability of the entire family, would make it clear. This ends now. Ned would not tolerate a son-in-law who allowed vendettas to override reason. He would demand that Chase stop targeting Michael immediately. The Corinthos Quartermaine tensions had always simmered beneath the surface, but escalating them now would only ignite consequences none of them could contain. Brook did not marry into a war. She married into a future, and that future was already precarious. Yet, the confrontation would take an even darker turn if Chase, pressed hard enough, finally broke his silence. What if Chase admitted he knew the truth? What if he confessed that he was aware Willow had been the one who shot Drew? Such a revelation would not simply alter the dynamic, it would detonate it. The room would shift from heated argument to stunned disbelief. Ned, who prides himself on reading people, would feel blindsided. Brook, already anxious about her husband's erratic focus, would feel the ground vanish beneath her. The knowledge that Chase had been carrying such explosive information and acting aggressively toward Michael while concealing it would change everything. The implications would be staggering. If Chase knew Willow was responsible for shooting Drew and chose to protect that truth, then his pursuit of Michael would no longer look like misguided suspicion. It would look like deflection. It would look like manipulation. It would suggest that he redirected attention away from Willow, possibly to shield her, possibly to control the narrative, possibly because of unresolved feelings that never fully disappeared. That possibility would introduce a new obsession, one that neither Ned nor Brook could ignore. Ned would immediately see the danger. If Chase suppressed evidence or interfered with the investigation in any way, even subtly, his career could be destroyed. Worse, if the truth surfaced publicly, Brook's name would inevitably be dragged into the fallout. A pregnant wife already vulnerable, entangled in scandal because her husband concealed the identity of a shooter. The optics alone would be brutal. The legal consequences could be devastating. Brook's fear would not be loud at first. It would settle quietly, heavily. She would question not only the secrecy, but the motivation. Why protect Willow? Why carry that burden alone? Why attack Michael while withholding the truth? Each question would dig deeper into a place she did not want to explore the possibility that Chase's loyalty had been divided in ways she never fully understood. Chase, cornered, might insist his silence was about preventing chaos. He might argue that exposing Willow immediately would have triggered retaliation, political consequences, even public hysteria. He may claim he was buying time, trying to manage the situation carefully, but intent would not erase impact. Secrets of that magnitude erode trust. And trust, once fractured during pregnancy, becomes even more fragile. Ned's fear would shift from anger to something colder calculation. He would begin assessing risk. How much does Chase know? How much did he conceal? Is there proof? Could this explode publicly? The obsession would no longer center solely on Willow's guilt, but on Chase's complicity in managing it. For Brook, the obsession would be more personal. She would fear that her husband's moral compass had tilted under emotional pressure. She would fear that unresolved attachments influenced decisions that now threatened their child's future. She would fear that the man promising to prioritize their family had already compromised that promise. The atmosphere would thicken with paranoia. Every prior decision Chase made would be re-examined. Every confrontation with Michael would look strategic rather than spontaneous. Every silence would feel deliberate. Ned would issue an ultimatum. The attacks on Michael stop immediately. No more aggressive maneuvers, no more secret agendas. And if there is truth being hidden, it must be brought into the open before it destroys them all. But the most haunting realization would linger beneath the confrontation if Chase was capable of carrying such a secret. What else was he capable of? The shock would not fade quickly. It would deepen into suspicion. And suspicion, once rooted inside the Quartermaine walls, rarely disappears without leaving permanent cracks behind.